Venables got asked about the offensive line multiple times. And I thought what he said, here's the quote: I think offensive line is in a much better position than we were in the spring. And he also mentioned the leadership that he's seen from Jacob Sexton and Jake Taylor and how those guys have improved and really kind of bringing the group as a whole along. But Ted, did anything really stand out to you when it comes to what you saw from the offensive line? I know you're always so focused on the defense, but did anything really catch your eye O line wise?
Um, yeah, I thought it looked solid. And again, day one weren't in full pads, but I didn't see what I thought were communication mistakes, blocking the wrong guy. For the most part, I feel like everyone was blocking the right guy, which is a good place to be and a lot harder to get than you would think. Um, there was a little bit different of a rotation. They were moving a couple of guys around. It looked like the right side was maybe a little more set, and they were maybe playing with some different combinations on the left side.
That's that's how it feels, right? Babechi Weewu continues to look fantastic. I was interested to see how he looked and how he moved when that 339 weight got posted. Looks good. Not worried about it. I think he's going to be
Yeah.
just fine at the right guard position. Jake Taylor at the right tackle position. Is he as fluid of an athlete as you want him to be at the right tackle spot? Probably not, but he looks bigger. And I think that he has really improved technically. And if you're a bit of a limited athlete, but you've got really good technique at the tackle spot, you're going to be able to play some good football. And I like the attitude he plays with. I like his demeanor, and he's got some natural leadership to him, which is always what you want to see from an offensive lineman. And I don't even know really if anyone's challenging him for the right tackle spot.
Well, I think that he,
Maybe you could kick Sexton over to right tackle if something happened to Jake Taylor, and then you've got Tarquin at left and Sexton at right. But I don't that
that might
right
be more of
side.
an answer for guard, right? If
Yeah,
so, but I think with he's another one of those guys that I expect him to make big strides in training camp because he's another player that just doesn't have like a real extensive history of playing time and even starting reps playing with the number ones. So like the more reps he gets, I mean, you're talking, I don't know, a couple thousand reps he'll get at starting right tackle between now and the first football game. You can become a different football player in that period, especially if he's got some of the technique stuff down and the bulk of your brain power isn't focused on technique. It's becoming second nature. You can start focusing on who am I blocking? What do I know about this guy? What front are they in? Who we like some of the other stuff. If you can start focusing on that instead of just your pure technique, and you can make some big strides.
it does feel like if you look at the center spot and you go all the way to left tackle, it feels like all those spots are open. It feels like that is going to be a constant competition. That's going to be a competition that I expect to go all the way through training camp. And it may be one of those situations where, we see Bill, and he's done it a lot in the past. We see him tinker with some different lineups in the non-conference games. You would love to feel good about your starting five when Tennessee comes to town.
Mm-hmm.
And at that center spot, especially, I think it's a wide open competition. I know that was one of our questions heading into training camp. Like, hey, is it just Hickman's the starter and that's that? I think it's wide open. And I'm not, so you've got Branson Hickman, you've got Josh Bates, and I don't think you can count Troy Everett out either. Once he's back and healthy, I expect him to get a chance as well. May the best man win at that position. We'll see who can be the most consistent guy throughout training camp. We'll see who runs out there first against Temple. But
What'd you see at center? Did you see stuff you liked or
I don't see I didn't see like a giant difference between the two guys. I think Hickman is more technically sound. I think everything is more calm with Hickman's hands and feet than Josh Bates. But Bates has been around longer. He knows the system. You got to assume he knows the system better with how much longer he's been in the program than Hickman. He clearly has, he's known the guys around him longer, which when you think about, hey, you're probably going to have a transfer right guard. I don't know how much that matters anymore, but like there is a relationship component to playing offensive line and certainly a relationship component to playing the center position. But I didn't see either guy just completely stand out. Once again, it's one practice. So it is what it is. But I don't think there's a ton of difference between them size wise either. Bates is like a little bigger, but not much. I, I don't know, man. I just think that anyone that thinks that there is a starting center established, that's not the way I see it.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good thing. I think there's going to be some
Oh,
good.
hell yeah. That
I mean,
competition is going to make all of those guys better.
and whenever you throw Troy Everett in the mix, I mean, you're gonna. And I know that you. I'd say all those guys are like center size. You don't have anyone that you would feel like, oh yeah, we need this guy at guard. But I mean, the fact that you've got three competent guys there helps you depth wise on the interior spots, I'm assuming.
No doubt. And Garen Hatchett stood out to me just with the way that he practices. Got a little edge to him, man. A guy that has no problem blocking through the whistle and a little after it. And I'm all about that. I think if you train those habits in practice, like that's the best way to play hard in the game. Is you kind of over exaggerate everything in practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Hatchet. He's not very big. I walked out there immediately and went, that guy's a center. He's not a guard. But I do that with a lot of guards. I just, I would like to see him play center. I don't know if that's going to happen with where they are depth wise at the guard spot, but I do think center would be his best position because he's not a very big guy, but that dude is not afraid to scrap, and I like it. I like it a lot. So you look at that, the left side of the offensive line, Michael Tarquin, Jacob Sexton, Heath Ozida, maybe Hatchett factors in on the left side, right? He was taking a lot of right guard reps. But I just think that Bill will eventually land on what he wants to do basically with center to left tackle, but I don't know if we'll know until the first group runs out against Temple. Like that's how it feels to me.
Yeah. Um, it feels like we don't know what the final five is going to look like, and we may not know until Tennessee game, right? There may be game reps and stuff with those battles, but it sounds to me like the floor of the offensive line has a chance to be fairly high. Like, who knows how, like, we may not have an incredibly high ceiling, but I think that you've got multiple competent guys at different positions, and you've got some good depth.
Yeah. Offensive line is also one of those positions where you're just gonna have to show it to me in a game. That's
Yeah.
really how I feel about all football players. Like, hey, there's no doubt that if you are practicing at a high level, it correlates to going and playing at a high level, typically. But we've never seen this group of guys play a snap together.
Yeah.
We don't know what the group's going to look like, but I know this. They've never played a single game, like a single snap that matters together. So, despite the way we feel heading into these games, like I'm just going to need to see how they work together and operate as a unit.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to make people feel good at all, but it just is what it is.
Yeah. No, and that's real. That's real. Especially, and competition is good, but you'd rather go in and have like know who your five starters are and be able to play and develop that chemistry for a long time. I mean, it could be difficult whenever it's maybe a constantly different person you're playing next to every series, and hard to figure out exactly how, because different guys communicate differently, and you got to get to know the people around you. But yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic about it, considering everyone thinks it's like the biggest vulnerability of our football team. I'd say, considering all the moving parts that we've had and where we sit right now for the first handful of days of training camp, I feel like we're in a pretty good spot.
I think Ozida is kind of the key to everything and how this line could look.
Hmm.
Like if he can get, because you look at him physically at the left guard spot and you go, that is a good looking guard. If he can get there technically,
What was he like,
and
315?
yeah, he looks great. He looks like a G5 left tackle is what he looks like.
Yeah.
But he is, I think that he is a, if you can get him to where he needs to be a starter, then the rest of the line kind of falls in place. But does he get to that point? I don't know. We'll see. But I think that you feel good about Sexton's versatility on that left side, whether he's got to play tackle or guard. Tarquin continues to impress me compared to what my expectations were for him with what I watched him put on tape at USC. But yeah, man, it feels like that this offensive line, when it comes to establishing a starting five, like it feels a long way off to finding out who those five guys are.
Yeah. That's all right. They got a long time.
Venables talked about the running back position and said some interesting things about Jovantae Barnes. And here's the quote. Said, many ways looks like his old self. And going into training camp, Ted, you and I talked about, okay, do we have a real difference maker at the running back position? When you look at Hicks and Sawchuk and Barnes and Taylor Tatum coming in and Franklin, the transfers, like, do they have a group of solid guys, but do they have a guy that can be a big time difference maker? Now, I still think that's a fair question, but I feel much better about the running back position. I feel much better about the group as a whole after watching Jovantae Barnes. He looks like the guy that we saw play against Florida State, just bigger and heavier. I mean, I would guess he's all of 210 pounds right now. And the most important thing, it's like he looks explosive. He also looks, and this is going to sound weird, but everything looked very heavy for him last year, like physically and mentally. And he looks much lighter this year. He looks decisive. He looked like he was having fun out at practice. And I don't know. And it's none of my business. Don't want to dive into what happened to that guy last year, but he's just got a different energy about him compared to what I saw from him being on the sideline last season. And it's very, very encouraging. I thought out of the running back group, he looked the best of everyone. When you combine how he looks physically, what he was doing with the ball in his hands, I thought he looked really, really good. And I think it's really, really encouraging for that group as a whole that Jovantae Barnes looks like he's back to being a guy that can be a significant contributor to this football team, because that's not how he looked, especially in the back half of the season last year.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked a little deflated, but yeah, I mean, the running back position, Sawchuk had a great end of the season. I think he had 400 or 500 yard games in a row to finish things. So he came on strong. Like you gotta give him the advantage right now when it comes to being the number one guy. But the competition looks good. I thought Hicks looked really good when I was out there. We've talked about him a lot physically. He looks really impressive, but he is, he's thicker and he looks like he's the between the tackles guy. Sawchuk looks like he's the open field guy, and Barnes kind of looks like the you know the perfect mix of both of those. So I don't know. I mean, I feel really good about the potential we've got there, the athleticism, a lot of the different traits, but back to like what you said about offensive line, we're going to have to see someone do it consistently out on the field.
I think Sawchuk, and he looks better physically than he did a year ago. It's clear he's added some strength, he's added some weight. I just think he's the most reliable guy. And you absolutely you just have to have an assignment sound running back. And I think that DeMarco Murray trusts him completely when he's out on the field. Like he knows there's not going to be any massive mental mistakes. And I think if you can get Barnes and Hicks to that point, I think that can be a pretty kind of equal share between those three guys. And then Taylor Tatum, you just never know with the true freshman. I mean, especially with the way that DeMarco coaches, like he's extremely demanding. Like it goes back to the trust factor. Like, can Tatum get to where he needs to get from a understanding his assignments to where DeMarco trusts him to put him out there and keep positions? I don't know. That's asking a lot of a true freshman that just got here in the summer. But
Isn't
when
that
you
funny
look
though?
at
Like, think about the early arrival thing. That's the new norm. And he showed up, in June for the summer workouts. I, it's, it is, he's way behind everyone else. He's just showing up for training camp and it's first football, and to not be there in the spring, I bet it's a bit jarring to the system, like with everything that's going on. And I don't know with those guys, it could be difficult to get reps. I mean, he's just that far behind.
we'll see. That's a long season.